If you think truancy laws have nothing to do with you anymore because you homeschool, I've got some bad news and you might want to watch this video. I'm Emily Fort with the Homeschool Freedom Coalition, and we're seeing a dangerous trend in legislation popping up all over the country. And we think you need to know about it because as a homeschool graduate, my whole family, all my siblings homeschool, you kind of like tune out what's going on in the government school sometimes. It's like, well, another crazy thing that just makes me feel better about our choice to homeschool, but I don't really think it affects me or homeschooling. And so I want to make sure this gets on everybody's radar. And the short version is they're filing truancy laws, truancy expansion laws that actually act as a gateway, as a stop action for people trying to leave government school and become homeschoolers. So for a little background here, truancy laws were originally written for kids who are enrolled in public school who weren't attending. That's it. They're not parenting evaluations. They're nothing else. They're just, you're enrolled at the school and you're not attending. They were just the enforcement mechanism of the government school system. But now lawmakers are starting to use truancy policy as a gatekeeping tool, a way to block families, block the exit ramp from government school. So we're going to talk a few short specifics here. In West Virginia, House Bill 5053 would prevent a child in an active truancy process from being withdrawn to homeschool for 90 days. So just to go over that again, if your child is flagged for attendance issues, bullying, illness, paperwork confusion, the doctor's note never made it, whatever, the state could force you to keep them in the public school system you're actively trying to leave. And this is not, we all know this now, this isn't about helping kids. This is about controlling the exits from their system. Illinois tried something similar last year with House Bill 2827, the so-called Homeschool Act, which was actually the We Don't Want You to Homeschool Act. And this would have required formal declarations to the state, and if the paperwork wasn't filed to their satisfaction, well, then the child could be labeled truant. Not missing a form, but truant. See, once again, once truancy is triggered, investigations and enforcement and all this other stuff now comes into play. This is how the mechanism shifts. Truancy has, these expansions of truancy law move from enforcing public school attendance to policing access to homeschooling. Tennessee families are raising concerns right now over expanded truancy enforcement with their bill, Republican filed SB 1968. This bill does the exact same thing we're talking about, is if a student is currently labeled truant, which in their state could mean as little as 3 days of missed school. And by the way, the school districts in Tennessee get to set their own truancy policy. So let's say that 1968 becomes the law and all these school districts say, hey, actually, we want just 2 days of truancy, of being out of school. Maybe 1 day is all it will take. Well, now, if SB 1968 passed in Tennessee, well, then all of a sudden you'd have to go before a judge to prove, to argue, to beg for the right to homeschool your kids because you've been labeled truant. See? And of course, this system is ripe for abuse. It's mind-boggling this stuff is even happening, especially in a deep red state like Tennessee. When attendance powers expand without protecting homeschooling, this puts the people who are trying the hardest to protect their kids from what's happening at government school at risk. And we all know that what's underneath all of this is not about protecting children because kids are getting bullied and beaten and assaulted and the R word, graped, I think they say. That's what the kids are saying. Whatever it is, this is happening every single day in government schools all over the country. This has nothing to do with protecting kids. This has to do with the fact that enrollment is dropping. And when their enrollment numbers drop, their funding drops. And when the funding drops, their power over the minds and dollars of these families also drops. And they aren't just going to surrender this power without a fight. So instead of saying, you may not homeschool, which of course would irritate and mobilize tens of thousands, now millions of homeschoolers all over the country, they say, we're just passing a bill to enforce attendance. We're just ensuring accountability. We're preventing neglect of these poor kids, right? It's always about the kids, don't you know? But the result is the same. They're making it harder for families to leave their broken system that is failing so many millions of kids every day. And once your right to homeschool depends on whether a government official believes you properly exited their government system, the whole balance of authority has shifted. Instead of you're the primary educator, you're the primary person in your child's life, you're now just petitioning one government agency to let you leave another government agency. And I don't even know why I have to say this, but I probably do. Nobody in homeschooling is defending abuse. That's always the cover of like, well, some horrible families. Well, some horrible government school teachers are doing far worse. And not just like rarely, it's hundreds of cases a year now. Like, we already have laws on the books to deal with neglect. We already have laws on the books to deal with abuse. We already have laws on the books for all of this. And meanwhile, tens of thousands of kids are being abused inside their government school every year. So we're done. We're totally over pretending that these truancy expansion bills are anything about safety for the kids. They can't keep the kids safe inside the building. This is not about abuse. This is about leverage. It's about creating friction on the off-ramp that millions of parents are using to leave government school. And this is the strategic reality of the situation on the ground. Once one state passes this sort of bill and normalizes this mechanism, other states are going to copy them. And especially if it's in a red state. So if you can get Tennessee to do this, you can get this bill passed anywhere. They're going to come after homeschooling with states like Tennessee as the example of, hey, if conservative red state, red supermajority Tennessee can do this, truancy expansion nonsense, why on earth wouldn't we in Illinois or in one of the other, deeply held Democrat states? And again, this is not a partisan issue. We're seeing these sort of backstabbing betrayals from Republicans doing this dirty work in red states. And once one state does it, other states are going to copy them. You're going to start seeing, a little 90-day waiting period here or a declaration registry there. Truancy triggers tied to random paperwork. They're going to invent more and more of that. And a portfolio, just to verify you're doing a good job, layer by layer, you're just going to see this stuff add up. So when you see a bill expanding truancy authority, just ask yourself one question. Does this bill make it harder for a parent to pull their child out of government school and bring them into homeschooling immediately? If that bill does, that's a problem. Homeschooling exists because parents before us, my parents are one of those families, refuse to accept the presumption that the state owns our kids. And if a bill starts messing with truancy language, the Homeschool Freedom Coalition, we're going to be all over it. Because they don't have to attack homeschooling directly if they can just slow the flow of families leaving. If they can just make it more difficult to leave, then they don't have to come after homeschooling directly. They can just close all the exits over time. We haven't done a thing to attack homeschooling. Meanwhile, they know that all the people currently homeschooling won't homeschool forever. Their kids will grow up, and they've choked off the flow of new homeschoolers effectively with laws like these. And they don't have to do anything else. They don't have to attack us. They just need to stop our growth. And long term, all the currently homeschooling families will graduate their kids and be done. And they've choked off new homeschoolers. And in red states, they're going to call this, attendance reform, or, we're worried about neglect. But I promise you, when those bills get filed, the Homeschool Freedom Coalition is going to raise the alarm, and we're going to help you contact these legislators fast. And I don't care what state they're in. I don't care if they say they're Republican. If these bills are being filed, they are an enemy to homeschooling, and the people who file them are attacking homeschooling, and they must face political consequences at primary time, at the ballot box, from homeschoolers. That's what we exist to do, is help remind homeschoolers of the political power that you hold. You represent the future of free education in this country. Stay involved, even if you're already a longtime homeschooler like me and my family, and my kids have never been inside a government school. But these truancy laws will affect homeschooling long term. In the meantime, stay free, stay the course, and remember, when they say attendance reform, they're not worried about your child. They're worried about their bottom line.